They put up the fence before dawn, metal posts like teeth pushed into the land, a ribbon of chain link bright as a lie, and by the time I walked out with my coffee, the pasture felt smaller, like someone had taken a bite out of it. That first morning, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw the padlock on the gate and the herd standing on the wrong side of the wire, milling like they knew they'd been cheated. I knew, in that cold sip of coffee, that this was not a mistake. My name's Eli Crawford. This place, Sycamore Hollow, has been my anchor for 3 generations. My dad bought it with his hands. My sister learned to ride on that ridge, and I've been fixing fence posts and county drains long enough to know the difference between a property line and a pettiness dressed up as power. I'm no lawyer. I'm no crusader. I'm a man who pays taxes and stitches up fences, but when somebody stakes a claim where our cattle used to roam, you get a decision to make. Stand down or stand up. The woman who ordered the fence, that's Lillian Hale, president of the new homeowners group across the lane. Willow Ridge, they call it, with its neat little cul-de-sacs and polished mailboxes, all trimmed hedges and promises of community standards. Lillian's the kind of person who keeps receipts for everything she's ever felt offended by, and she's got friends with deep pockets who like tidy property lines, even when tidy means taking someone else's land. Her motive was never hidden: expand the development a hair, at a few home sites, squeeze a little more profit out of a controversy, and keep the neighbors from making noise. Power looks good on a lot of people. At first it was letters. Violation of the appearance ordinance. Complaint regarding livestock proximity. Then the trucks came. I climbed the slope and found stakes hammered into the ground, survey ribbon fluttering like mockery, and a stamped document nailed to a post that smelled of a fancy law office, clean, slick, confident. But the marker was wrong. The county records showed a different line, and a quick call to the old clerk, the woman who handed my father the original deed, confirmed it. The fence crossed 40 feet of our pasture. 40 feet that meant a barn doorway, meant grazing for the winter, meant my margin for error. I unlocked that gate because they left calves in there, and calves don't understand paper law. Lillian called it trespass. I called it rescuing animals. She called the sheriff. I called my sister. The sheriff took pictures. We both filed claims, and then the real game began. You learn who people are by how they fight. Lillian hired a surveyor who had a ribbon around his wrist, the kind that says he'll sign what you pay him to sign. They filed paperwork with stamps that looked real if you only glanced. They sent a notice that our driveway was non-compliant. They posted a blog with a photo of my property and a caption that made me sound like the town hoarder. Man refuses to maintain land. I've been called worse at the feed store, but this was different. This hurt in a way that cuts close to home, because it spread like a rumor at the co-op and put my name under a microscope. That's when my daughter, Maya, came back. She's an environmental attorney now, the kind who speaks slow and knows how to make a court transcript make the other side look clumsy. She stepped out of her city shoes and into my boots for 2 weeks, and the first night she shut the kitchen light and sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug, and said, "Dad, they can't just forge a survey and call it truth." She smelled like coffee and moral certainty, and I felt, for the first time in months, less alone. We started digging. There's always a trail where people think there isn't one. Paperwork ends up in trash. Invoices have signatures that don't match. LLCs spring up with names that mean nothing. Willow Holdings, Redfern Partners, and you follow the money. We found an obscure firm with a P.O. box that led to a real estate broker with a reputation for creative solutions. We pulled old minutes from the homeowners' meetings and found votes recorded on days that never happened and signatures that looked like they'd been traced. Motive: expansion, quick flips, markup profits. Opportunity: a sleepy county office and a developer who thought rules were mere suggestions. And Lillian, she didn't act alone. There were emails where she floated ideas about taking care of the Crawford problem, phone calls where she asked about a surveyor who's discreet. Once she cornered me at the diner and said, "Eli, you should be reasonable. People want peace here." I told her I liked peace when it came with an apology and a correct property line. She smiled like a shark. "You'll be offered a buyout," she said. "You can leave quietly." It was thinly veiled brass knuckles language, and I felt the room tilt. Our fight splintered into 3 fronts. The county recorder who grudgingly reopened files, Maya's lawsuit challenging the legitimacy of the survey, and the court of public opinion where local paper ran a piece on conflicts between long-timers and newcomers. That was when Dell, the young couple across the road who'd lost their house a year back under suspicious foreclosure, showed up at our fence. They were raw, grateful, and angry in a way that made community feel less like rumor and more like armor. People started to come forward. A retired schoolteacher with missing lot markers, a contractor who said he'd been asked to not look too hard, a farmer who'd been threatened after he complained about irregular assessments. Patterns emerge when you have enough voices. Lillian's side escalated. There were late-night threats, tires slashed on my pickup, paint poured on a mailbox, small things meant to bruise and intimidate. She pushed back with ethics complaints against my daughter, claimed I was harassing neighbors, and hired a private investigator who parked outside my gate with binoculars and bad coffee. They were trying to make us look unstable, to make our cause look like a personal vendetta. The logic was ugly but clear. If they could make us the story instead of the fake survey and the forged votes, the truth would drown in noise. Then we found the ledger. A contractor who'd been paid in cash left an envelope in a truck with copies of wire transfers, names of shell companies, and a spreadsheet that, when you bleary-eyed compare it to county tax records, reads like a map to fraud. Maya sat at the kitchen table and read it until her lips were white and said, "This is embezzlement." And that's when the Attorney General's office called. The public meeting was messy and beautiful. Lillian took the podium with her notes and her practiced smile, and for a while she controlled the room until I asked one small question, the kind you ask when you've spent nights lining up facts like bones. "Can you show us the chain of title on Willow Holdings?" I said. The room shifted. The developer squirmed. A reporter clicked on her recorder. Voices rose. People in the crowd who had been silent for years spoke up. The retired teacher read an affidavit. The contractor produced a check stub. Dell held up foreclosure papers and said the words out loud. "They took my house with paperwork that wasn't mine." The hush that settled over the room felt like an exhale. Court dates followed. Charges civil and criminal were filed. The forged surveyor was subpoenaed, and he mumbled something about a rush job. Lillian's name appeared on documents tied to shell companies. Her friends began to distance themselves like a tide retreating. The fence came down under a judge's order one damp morning, and the first time the cattle wandered back into what had always been theirs. I cried like a man who hadn't realized how much he missed the sound of hooves until they were back. But it wasn't clean. Lillian pleaded ignorance. Her lawyer painted her as a figurehead who had been manipulated by men who lived for deals. Some of the homeowners who'd lost money got restitution, some didn't. The developer faced fines, a suspended license, pressure to reform. The county tightened its process for recording surveys, and a new ordinance required public hearings before developers could alter property lines. Justice, it turned out, looked like paperwork and tedious hearings and slow, steady enforcement, not fireworks, not a single grand verdict. For me, the thing that mattered most wasn't the legal outcome. It was the way the place reassembled itself. Maya stayed longer than she'd planned. She helped set up a small fund for neighbors who'd been taken advantage of. The community formed a watchdog committee, stubborn people who met monthly and kept an eye on minutes and signatures. We repaired fences, planted trees where the posts had scarred the soil, and at night, sitting on the porch, we listened for the quiet that comes after a long, noisy storm. I tell you this not because I think I'm a hero, I'm not, but because sometimes standing up feels small, and sometimes it feels enormous, and you don't get to pick the moment. People asked me why I fought. Was it principle, pride, money? It was a mixture. The shape of my father's hands in a photograph, the way the land held the stories of people who worked it, the idea that if you let the line move for profit once, it moves for good until you have nothing left. And maybe, too, because I wanted my kids to know that someone would stand when the rules were bent to pick up an extra dollar. There's an argument people will make that development brings progress, that change is inevitable. I won't say all development is bad. I will say it should be honest. If Lillian's group had come and asked, if they'd said, "We'd like to buy a strip of pasture," we could have talked about price and plans. We could have negotiated like neighbors. The sin was secrecy and greed disguised as order. So here we are, the fence gone, the pasture whole, and a new set of signs at the county office. Transparency in land records, public access. Some will say the law will do what the law will. Others will grumble that the town has changed. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe Willow Ridge will try something else. Maybe other developers will look elsewhere, but I do know this. Truth, like sunlight, And when enough people point flashlights at the same corner, the rats get nervous. If this story made you feel something anger, relief, curiosity, I want to hear it. Tell me what you think is right or wrong here. Have you seen power used to squeeze someone out of their roots? Do you believe development should trump history, or should there be a line that money can't cross? Drop a comment, share your story, and if you care about justice in your own neighborhood, tell us how you'd handle it. We're all building a map of what community means. Help draw the line straight.